And so Melissa is passionate about helping people build strong, positive relationships with children based on empathy and connection, and has become particularly interested in the area of emotional intelligence. Melissa is a registered teacher, art therapist, counsellor, and authorised parent effectiveness trainer. Melissa's ongoing vision is to help parents and teachers enjoy the roles that we have. So this session, the outline for this session, it is so easy to put everyone else's needs ahead of your own. And I'm sure many of us are nodding our head right now, especially if you work in the helping profession such as teaching. Yet when we care for ourselves, we are better able to care for others. So true. Look at, sorry, I've got lots of messages coming in. Look at how, this session we're going to look at how we can begin to take better care of ourselves by exploring our individual needs and how to begin meeting them. So Melissa, looking forward to your messages, and I'm just going to put myself on mute because we've got lots of team messages coming through. Okay, enjoy everyone.
Thanks, Lisa. This is a very different platform, and usually I'd like it to be a lot more interactive than I fear it's going to be. But because there are only a few of us, I think we've got time to do a speedy introduce ourselves. So throughout, I'm going to get you to unmute, and you can do that by pushing it down on your space bar if you want to talk. And I'm encouraging you to ask questions as we go. But if we could start off by getting each of you to just say your name, where you're from, maybe which age group you work with, what I mean by that is primary school or like a childcare centre, and mainly what you're hoping to get out of the workshop. So I don't know whether you all see each other in the same order I do, but Rhonda, would you mind starting us off?
Sure.
Thank you.
Hi, yeah, my name's Rhonda Murphy. I work in a community kindergarten. So I'm just interested in this session just for something different, I think. So I think it's just a nice perspective to look at self-care.
Great, and I'm hoping that you will get something personal out of it. Lucinda.
Hi, my name's Lucinda Stedman. I work at Chelmer Station Community Kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm just after some self-care tips.
Thank you. Bern? Maybe Annette? Lee? Or Tonya?
Hi, I'm Tonya.
Thanks, Tonya.
Hi, how are you?
Well, thank you.
Yeah, for me, I've sort of just been going on a bit of a self-care journey myself, and I'm just looking for tips that maybe I can help myself and other colleagues on a kindergarten. We have a kindergarten at a school, so and maybe just offer some advice and some direction for myself and other staff really, because if we don't look after ourselves, if we don't fill our cup, then it makes it very hard to give and be the best that we can be for our little leaves.
Yeah. Great. Well, I want to start off, and I did see a message there. A couple of people don't have microphones, so my apologies that you don't get a chance to introduce yourselves. I want you to take a moment to imagine the following type of week, and it's probably the type of week that we can all relate to. And I'm just going to get my PowerPoint working. So you race to work and you've forgotten to eat your breakfast. Although if you did have a breakfast, it might have been something yummy like this. You did remember though to grab a quick cup of coffee on your way out the door, but it is the end of term and our students are tired, they're more needy than they normally are. You've got parents who want to meet with you. You've got report cards, or if you're not in the primary, you've still got reporting to do. There's lessons to prepare, activities to get ready for the next term, or if you are in community care, you often don't get the same holidays that schools get. And then on top of that, you have your personal calendar, which is actually full to the brim with your own children's commitments, or if you don't have children, it might be nieces, nephews, running people around. And if you're like the rest of us, you have an endless list of chores to complete. And that's how I feel a lot of the time, is that I just got my head stuck in a washing machine. But when we get into this frantic pace of lives, what we typically do, and I'm sure you'll be able to relate, is we might... Do you like that picture there of the Pilates girl? I do Pilates and I have never got myself into that position. But one of the first things we do when we get busy is we quit our Pilates class. We will cancel a date with friends. We might cancel date night with our partner. And then we'll reach for the comfort foods, and might reach for a glass of wine. Now, I suspect that all of you already have an inkling of what self-care is, like you just said. But I think part of the reason you may have chosen this workshop is because you're not necessarily doing as good a job at it as you could. Otherwise, you probably would be doing something else. So my quick overview is that I want to begin by defining what self-care actually is and getting a better understanding of it. Talk about some of the reasons why we struggle with self-care and what things get in the way, and then explore what self-care means to you personally. And then hopefully I'll leave you with some tools that will allow you to begin your own self-care plan that's very personalised towards you. I was going to ask, so feel free to answer if you have got a microphone, but what comes to mind when you think of self-care? So just in a few keywords, and maybe you can type it in the chat box if you're not, if you don't have a microphone. Just what are the first things that come to mind when you think of self-care? Does anybody want to offer some thoughts?
Paying attention to yourself.
Paying attention to yourself, yeah. I'll just check. Putting my needs first, somebody said.
Self-value and self-worth.
Yeah, and it's a bit of all of those things. My definition is that self-care, although it can mean different things to different people, there are some similar themes that emerge. So some of the practices that will often be referred to are getting sufficient and quality sleep, regular exercise, eating well, mindful practices often come up, and doing things that will help us connect with one another and fill our cups through social emotional support. Equally, there's lots of things when you start to look into self-care that are commonly to be avoided, you know, too much fatty food, too much alcohol, stress, work. And if you look at my definition there, I want to draw your attention to a couple of key words. So firstly, self-care is something that we do deliberately to take care of aspects of ourselves. So in other words, it's not something that's just going to happen by accident, but rather something that oftentimes requires careful planning and conscious effort. It's also self-initiated, which means that whilst other people can do nice things for us and can care for us, that's not the same as the care that we can give ourselves. And it also means that we're responsible for it, that other people can't do it for us. And commitment, and what a loaded word commitment can be. So in my family, they actually joke about starting Monday, and this began because on each Sunday night, I would say, right, this is the week. I'm going to stick to my healthy eating plan. I'm going to get more exercise. And I would start the week off really well with, I'd eat my salads, and I would, you know, resist the birthday cake that was on offer. But then by the end of the week, my resolve would go, and I'd be having, you know, just one glass of wine. And then by Saturday morning, it was bacon and eggs. And then by Saturday afternoon, the cheese and biscuits were out. And by Sunday, I then not only felt physically bloated and lethargic, but emotionally I felt quite negative because I'd really let myself down. And it was only when my children started saying to me, oh, starting Monday, that I realized this was a cycle that kept happening, and that I wasn't making the commitment to myself, or a recognition of how easy it is to make a commitment and then not follow through on it. And that's part of self-care, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on in one of the barriers to caring for ourselves. And lastly, I think remembering that it's very individual, depending on what our needs and wants are, what our personality and temperament is, how motivated we are, how much time we've got, will all make a difference to what kind of self-care we have. And I guess wanted to talk about some of the ways that, or the reasons why we struggle. Sometimes we've got the wrong definition of what self-care is. And actually, when I was doing a bit of investigating for this topic, self-care used to mean care of the self. And that was actually people performing like low-risk medical treatment, so giving themselves insulin shots or exercising to free doctors up to do the more advanced and important tasks. But today's view of self-care seems to be this idealistic view that we're going to have this prolonged happiness and pleasure, which is often a little bit unrealistic. One of the other things is that putting ourselves first means putting others last. So sometimes we fall into kind of an either-or thinking and feel like we won't be able to take care of others if we're putting ourselves first, and yet precisely the opposite is true. Sometimes one of the things that gets in the way is that we think we can't afford it. So like I said earlier, we're kind of sold this idea that self-care is having a fancy spa treatment, or it's going on a meditation retreat. And unfortunately, that sometimes means that we discount the very simple things like getting outside and getting some fresh air, for example. Sometimes we are just so busy being busy that we either don't recognize when we need self-care, or if we do recognize that we need it, we keep putting it off until we're less busy. I'll just get this job done, or I'll just do something. And then by the time we realize we're already in overwork and overwhelm. And then for some people, we struggle to take care of ourselves because we simply don't believe that we deserve it, which is sometimes one of the hardest barriers to overcome. And I think it's important to distinguish too between self-indulgence, which might feel good in the short term, but then not be good for our long-term health. So when we over-caffeinate our bodies and then we don't sleep well, or we might binge on Netflix, and if that's at the expense of getting exercise or getting sleep, then that can be detrimental in the long term. And that's not to say that those things are not good to do occasionally, but if we're relying on those as those kind of quick fixes and short-term gains, then it may be that we're not caring for ourselves in terms of our long-term health, and maybe we need to re-examine our priorities if that's the case. Self-care is sometimes needing to put more effort in the short term to get started, getting your sneakers on to get out for a walk, but having a longer term benefit. Please stop me if you have questions, or type them in the chat box, because Kim is going to monitor that for Lisa is going to monitor that. Sorry, Lisa. It might seem like a no-brainer, but I'm going to quickly go through why we need self-care, just in case you need a bit of convincing. Research shows that managing stress and avoiding burnout, it can happen by taking good care of ourselves. And it really, by caring for ourselves, it allows us the time and space to recalibrate. And research actually shows that positive feelings and positive things, it will kind of undo negative effects. So the stress that we have on our bodies physically and mentally can be undone with appropriate self-care. Increased cognitive function and productivity. Now, it may seem counterintuitive that by doing less you can actually achieve more. However, when we take care of ourselves and prioritize things like rest and sleep and eating well and exercising, our productivity improves. There's a wonderful book, I know it's going to be backwards, but it's called The Sweet Spot, How to Accomplish More by Doing Less. And Christine Carter, the author there, says that overwork and overwhelm makes us dumber than if we were stoned or deprived of an entire night's sleep. So it is like we are trying to function in a drunk state. So self-care reduces our stress, increases our ability to plan, to organise, to resist temptations, to even speak fluently. Physical health and well-being. There's a myriad of physical symptoms that come from not looking after ourselves: fatigue, stomach upset, cardiovascular disease. I probably don't need to list them all. Mental illness, so anxiety and depression are all related to not caring for ourselves sufficiently. And work-life balance can be improved by better self-care. So sometimes that requires being more assertive and being able to put boundaries in place, which is, I think, often hard for teachers and early childhood teachers, because we generally are real givers. We want to give to our children and to our extended communities, but that sometimes comes at a personal cost. And like, I think it was Rhonda who mentioned trying to give to staff as well. And then the last point I've got there is more to give others. So when we're looking after ourselves, we really do have more to give. And I don't know whether you've heard of Dr. Laura Markham from AHA Parenting, and she uses a beautiful term called emotional generosity, which is describing that ability to give love and compassion and acceptance, not just to yourself, but to those around you. And I think as teachers, that's, you know, we have an innate desire to be kind and caring to our students, but I think when we're taking care of ourselves, then that allows that care to extend emotionally to the children in our care. I'm going to get you, if you've got pen and paper, I actually want you to write down the answer to this question. My husband asked me this I was moaning about, I don't have enough time for everything, I've got too much to do. And even though I know the things that I should be doing to take care of myself, like so many of us, I get busy with my children's commitments, I get busy with work commitments, and the first thing to go is my own self-care. And I should say that we teach often what we most need to learn, so I've by no means got this mastered. But my husband asked me this question when I was moaning about not having enough time. He said, what is the one thing that if you did it regularly would make a significant positive difference to your happiness? And that'll be different for each of us. So take a moment just to think, what are those things what's just one thing that comes to mind straight away that you already know would make a significant difference positively to what you're currently doing? You don't have to share that, but if you can have it in mind and maybe even write it down. I just know for me personally, that helped me hone in on just choosing one small thing to begin with. And for me, it was meditation, because I know that when I meditate daily, I'm a much nicer, more balanced person. I manage my sleep better. I manage my stress. But that will be different for each of you. For some people, it's exercise, but some people it's catching up with their girlfriends. And Tonya said, me too, Melissa. I'm not quite sure what that was in response to. Now I'm going to take you through a quick exercise because I wanted this to be as practical as possible. I want you to think now, and if you've got pen and paper, I strongly urge you to use it, to either take notes as the first things that come to mind, but also to draw. And this is the art therapist in me coming out. I love to draw things, so respond in any way you like. But I want you to choose. It's a fictitious activity, but we are thinking about your ideal day out. And the first thing to think about is, what setting would you be in? So if you could have one day to be wherever you wanted to be, think about it in detail. What season would it be? What temperature? What environment? What time of day would you like it to be? You know, a warm sunny day? Would you like it to be a star-filled sky in the evening? And the more detail you can write down, the more effective this exercise will be. Think about what you would be doing. Would you be reading a book? Would you be by a fire having a glass of wine? Would you be doing something more energetic, like those puzzle rooms and escape rooms are quite popular at the moment? Would you go to a theme park? And really importantly, who would you be with? Or would it be a large group? Would it be a small group? Would it be friends? I mean, I think typically when I ask people this question, they would say they would want to be with their family or their close friends. But during COVID, I think we've all had a lot of time with our family. So you might actually find that you would prefer just to be alone at this point in time. What kind of interactions would you be having? Would it be lots of laughter and really jovial atmosphere? Would it be intellectual conversations that are stimulating? Would it be quiet? And I know I'm going through this fairly quickly, and it's because of the time constraints that we've got, but this is an activity that you can come back to at any time. And add in more detail, because the more you refine it, the more you're identifying what your personal needs and wants are. So in the senses, what things would you see? What beautiful aromas would there be? Would it be fresh country air? Would it be freshly cut grass? For me, the smell of fresh coffee would be in there. Would there be music or laughter or stillness? And thoughts and feelings. And this is something you might want to ponder a little more later on, but this is getting you to consider the emotional aspect of your ideal experience and think about what, similar to interactions, what thoughts and feelings are going to be most prominent. Is everybody right if I keep going, or do you want a few minutes to jot some things down? And if you want to speak, you'll need to push your space bar. No? All right, will continue. Now, the reason I got you to do that is to begin to think, like I said, about what your personal needs are. And now I'm going to kind of go off track a bit, and then it'll all come together at the end. But I'm going to use a framework developed by Dr. William Glasser, who is a psychologist, and he talks about 5 basic genetic needs. And by genetic, he means that we have those needs from birth. So children have these needs, we all have these needs as adults, and they don't go away. They do vary in strength so one person might have a high need for love and belonging, and another person has a high need for freedom. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. But it just gives us a nice framework for looking at ourselves in terms of our self-care. Survival is a biological need. So for that, it's, I guess, because we're in a developed country, for the most part, and this is not everybody, but for the most part, we have our survival needs met. So things like food and water and shelter and warmth, but it does also include personal security and safety, which can impact some of your choices around things like, I know for me, I'm not a high risk taker, but my husband is. And so our need or level of survival need is different. The other 4 needs that we're going to go through are psychological needs. So the first one is love and belonging. And research has showed that love and belonging and that sense of connection is absolutely paramount to our health. And it is almost as important as food and water is. And even Karen Young mentioned that this morning, the importance of love and belonging. And it will look different for different people. So some people will get that love and belonging need met from their family, or it might be part of a church group or a sports club. It might be your staff or your community centre that you're part of. In addition to receiving love or giving love, you need to have both aspects. So you need to be able to show love for other people as well as receive it. The next area is power, and it's sometimes a little bit misunderstood, because I would prefer it was called empower rather than power, because it doesn't mean power over somebody else. It's about our power over ourselves, and we all have a need at varying levels of feeling and believing that we're capable of success. It's oftentimes linked with skills and achievement, and that could be, for some people, that might be getting a PhD, but for other people it might be learning how to knit. We've all got different ways, as I said, of meeting that need, but it's about confidence and self-mastery and self-improvement and feeling like we can make an impact and influence people. So having some kind of sense of purpose and meaning. And then the last of the 4 needs is fun, sorry. For some people, that is a riotous laughter. For others, it's just a peacefulness or a joy. For me personally, it is learning. I just have an incredible love of learning, and that comes under meeting the need for fun and play. But I don't think, well, I know Brené Brown and also Stuart Brown, although they're not related, both have done an enormous amount of work around play and the importance of play, but not just for children, but for us as adults. And we seem to have almost lost that ability to be in the moment and have fun and play. Oh, sorry, and I've missed freedom. Hang on. And freedom is being able to act without coercion. And I think this is an important one to highlight for the children in our care as well, that a child who has a high need for freedom is not going to like being directed and told what to do or coerced into doing things. And you'll see these different needs play out differently in the children in our care, as well as being able to relate to them yourselves. Oh, looks like I'm going backwards. Sorry. Okay, hopefully that's right. Now I'm going to send you this handout, and I should have mentioned earlier to please write down my email. I'll have it at the end, but it's stradermel@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to send you this worksheet to fill in, and then I've got another one a little bit later. Just for you. So the idea of this is that you take that picture of your ideal day out that you started on earlier, and you look at the different things that you've written down. So if you've written down going to the movies, then trying to identify, well, which need is that meeting for you? Is it fun, or is it more that you do it with friends and then it becomes partly your love and belonging need as well? Like I said before, learning is a high need for me in terms of fun, but equally it helps meet my need for power and feeling empowered as well. So that's an activity that you can do just to really to raise your self-awareness and start to notice where it's important to focus your attention in terms of your self-care. And I'm using lots of visuals, and they're saying similar things, but I just find visuals help me. So hopefully for any of you who are visual learners, this will be helpful as well. There is that notion of filling our bucket, and that we can't offer from an empty cup, that we have to have our cups full. But I just want to stretch this out to we actually have 5 buckets, and each of those buckets is one of our needs. Each of us has a different needs profile. So some of us, as I said earlier, will have a massive bucket for love and belonging, but then only a small need for power. And we might have only a small need for power, but it still might be a need that's not being met. So when you do that needs profile that I just showed you previously, have a think about whether there are any of those needs that are currently not being met, because that might help you hone in on where to focus. And another visual for you is, if you think about if we were all chairs, we are all different, we're decorated differently, but we have the same basic structure. We have 4 legs and we have a seat, and then most of us have a back. If you imagine that each of those 4 needs that I've just talked about is one of the legs of the chair, and that the seat of the chair is the survival need, which is the biological need. When each of those needs is being satisfied, whether it's a need that has a small strength for you or a larger strength, meaning it's a larger bucket, when all 4 of those needs are being met, we're in balance. And when we're in balance, we can take on the world. We can carry and help other people as well as ourselves. However, if we were only meeting, say, 2 of those needs, for example, we might find that we need support, that we're feeling a little bit off balance. Worse still, if we are not meeting any of our needs, or we're only meeting 1, it's really, really hard to stay in balance and be healthy and have a good sense of well-being. Now, I've got the little pause down here because I've just given you a lot of information about the 5 basic needs, about your ideal day out. Are there any questions before I continue? Okay, I'm hoping this is helpful. It's such an unusual feeling in this format, because you don't have the interaction and the feeling that you would normally get in a room where you can, it's almost palpable. Oh, yeah, I don't want that. What I'm going to do now, and you've already seen it, is I'm going to show you an I Spy picture. If you can, if you've got a mouse, if you can find on the bottom of your Zoom screen the reactions button and hover your mouse over it so that in a moment, when I flash up that picture, and this is a bit of an experiment for me because I am not an expert on Zoom, could you, when you see the picture of, or within the picture, you find the fire extinguisher, can you hit your like button or your any of the reactions will do. So are you ready? And I'm timing you. So you are looking for a fire extinguisher. Ready? Go. Let's try again. All right, Lee's found it, Bern's found it, Laura's found it, and Lucinda, and Rhonda. All right, I'm going to estimate that took, I was counting, it was about 3 or 4 seconds. We're going to do the same exercise again, and I'll explain why we're doing this in a minute. So have your reaction button ready again. This time I'm going to flash up a different I Spy picture, and I want you to find this sign, the one that says attention. And I'm going to do the same. I'm going to time you again. So ready, go. All right, and most people have found it. The reason I did that was because, and you were faster the second time. Usually when I do it, people are much faster the second time. And my point is that we focus in on what we're expecting to see. So if we're expecting to not have time for self-care, then we won't. Whereas if we expect that we're going to fit a walk in, then we will. And it's like if we are looking for the good in people and situations, that's what we find. And if we're focused on what will go wrong and why we can't do something, then that information is also what our brains unconsciously search for. Our perceptions and our experiences are largely based on that, on what we choose to focus on. Now, the reason I mentioned that is because, and I'm not going to give you a to-do list or you must start practicing gratitude or mindfulness, but I do want to talk about those two in particular as being great self-care habits and invite you to consider starting them, because people who practice gratitude have lowered heart rates and less stress. They experience greater life satisfaction. They are more helpful and kind. They're considerably more enthusiastic, interested, and determined. And they feel 25% happier. So who wouldn't want those things? If we're able to cultivate positive emotions, it puts the brakes on the stress responses and it has an undoing effect on negative emotions and on the physical response that we get in our bodies. I think, unfortunately, gratitude has been popularized in grateful journals and gratitude journals. And although that's one way to practice gratitude, there's lots of other things that you can do too, like writing letters, writing emails, messages of thanks. Group gratitude lists are a really fun way for both your family but also your classroom. And I'll give you an example. I've got a great big piece of butcher's paper and I put it up along the bottom of a wall at our house last Christmas. And my children thought it was fun because it was like they were writing on the walls. But each day, instead of an advent calendar, we would write something that we were grateful for onto this piece of butcher paper, and or they could draw a picture. And that's a fun thing that you could do in the classroom too. Another great idea for the classroom and for yourself personally is gratitude prompts. So Teach Starter, there's a picture of it just here of some of the prompts that we can use to get us thinking, because it doesn't necessarily come naturally to everybody. I'm a bit of a glass half empty rather than half full. So having a gratitude journal has been really useful for me. And then mindfulness and breathing. I mean, meditation is one way of practicing mindfulness, but even just stopping and tasting our meal, for example, are day-to-day ways that we can practice mindfulness. And you would have heard Karen Young talk this morning too about the positive impacts of just breathing, of being able to calm the nervous system. And I couldn't agree more with that, actually. So research tells us that if you practice mindfulness, you will experience more positive emotions and more frequently, that you'll be in more emotional balance, heightened self-knowledge, leading to greater self-control, which I guess is another way of saying be in balance and make more effective decisions for yourself, and increased empathy. There are some great apps too. Headspace, Smiling Minds is the one that Karen Young mentioned, and also Deepak Chopra has a website where he sometimes offers 21-day sessions. Let's see. So your personal plan, because I really did want to have the goal of making this something that you could use personally, not just kind of the theory of it, but something that you could have tools to take away. So if you were creating a personal self-care plan, and I maybe needed to use different words there because it sounds onerous, but I'm actually saying we need to just choose one new habit. And you might go back to the one that we mentioned, or that, you know, when I said right at the beginning, to write down one thing that you would do differently. So whether it's mindfulness or gratitude, or whether it's exercising or spending more time with your partner, whatever it is, choose a new habit, but then break it down into its mini habits. So if it was going to be gratitude, the first thing to do is find a place where you're going to write it. So whether it's a book or a notebook or something, and put it where you can see it. And that's your first step. And then put a pen with it. The next thing is to link it with an existing habit, because out of mind, out of sight, out of mind, if we don't see things or don't have something familiar to link it to, we often don't change our habits at all. So for me personally, when I was trying to start a gratitude journal, I put it with my phone, and whenever I checked my Facebook, I would write notes either in my phone or in the journal. Or you could set an alarm on your phone that just was a reminder that every morning or every evening, whenever you know that you can fit it in, that you can do that. My children, and it is not related to gratitude, but yesterday they had a Pilates assessment, and both of them need to work on balance. So the instructor said to them, when you brush your teeth, and they've got the electric toothbrushes, so they're timed for 2 minutes. She said, in the morning, stand on one leg while you brush your teeth, and then in the evening, do the other leg. And what she was doing was linking that new habit to an existing habit. The other thing to do is plan for obstacles, and in detail, because the more you can identify times where you're likely to quit or not follow through on a plan, the more detail you have about when those times might come up and what you can do about them, then the more likely you are to get just stick to your plan. And the quote that I've got there is, it's much better to succeed at just one small thing at a time than it is to fail at bigger things or many things at once. One of the things that Christine Carter suggests in, and I mean, she is American, in her book, is yay me. And she said, remember to congratulate yourself, not just for the accomplishment of losing 5 kilos, but for every little mini habit. And when she was learning to meditate, she would congratulate herself just by getting up when the alarm went off. And then she would congratulate herself. And I mean, it's a bit counterproductive to stick to your diet and then celebrate with a glass of wine, for example. But she's saying, like, do a little internal victory dance that gets the dopamine flowing and increases the likelihood then that you will repeat the habit. And the last thing is avoiding self-sabotage. So as you begin to change, don't fall into the trap researchers call the licensing effect, which is kind of what I was doing with my, starting Monday, is that I would feel like, oh, I've done a really good job, and now I can eat what I want. And then I'd overdo it, and I'd almost be worse than if I just allowed myself to have a treat during the week. So I guess what she's saying with that is it's more useful to focus on the goals and values rather than the end product, the accomplishment, but just to look at those small little wins along the way. So we've got 10 minutes left and I'm just about done. I was going to finish with this lovely quote. Rest and self-care are so important. When you take the time to replenish your spirit, it allows you to serve others from the overflow. You cannot serve from an empty vessel. And I really hope that you can take some of those tools with you. And for those of you who've got a microphone and are happy to share, I would be really curious to hear whether there are some things that you will take away from this and a small change that you would consider making to improve your self-care. And because you all deserve it, you really do deserve it in such a, I think, an emotionally taxing profession at times with our little people who need our love and care, that we can sometimes not prioritize ourselves. So I'd be really curious in the last little bit of time that we've got, whether there were any questions, whether you would be comfortable sharing something, some small change that you might like to make. And if you don't have a microphone, feel free to use the chat box. No questions, no insights.
We've just had Bern say breaking down the new habits into mini habits. Thanks, Bern. Following on from that, I really liked connecting a new habit with the old habit, like the toothbrush cleaning in your daughters. Yeah. That was a really great example.
Yeah, it's a very practical idea, and I mean, we kind of take those things. I don't know. Sometimes we just need to stop and think about it because we don't always do that.
And I love others. Feel free to talk up too. But I also loved there was a cartoon picture of oxygen drop-down masks earlier in the PowerPoint, and I've seen that before. But once again, just seeing it again, going, yep, if I aren't looking after myself well, then you've got to help yourself to the oxygen mask first. And they say that on the aeroplanes, don't they?
Yes. Yeah.
Anyone else? I love your chair analogies. Like if people were chairs and all the different chairs, like that's And then the imbalanced chair, off-balance chair. What are other people thinking? Feel free to put your videos on and your microphones on.
Well, I might be so brazen to ask another question then, because I know that with these type of conferences, as the day goes on, we get more and more cognitive overload, and I'm always trying to improve what I do. So I'm wondering if there is any feedback that you could give me about what would it, if A, what was useful, but B, what would have been more useful? What would you have preferred if you'd had your ideal presentation? And as I said, if you think of something later on, you are more than welcome to email me, and you'll see that my email is on the slide that's on there at the moment. All right, well, if we've got no questions, Lisa, I just would like to wish everyone well and thank you for listening. And as I said, I hope you get something to take away that will help you reconsider how you can take effective care of yourself.
Okay. Melissa, there's just a couple more messages coming through. Not sure whether you can see them. Is really good. Thank you, Melissa, particularly the visuals. And I'm very much a visual learner, so yeah, I enjoyed those too. Easy to listen to and follow. I think we all need to look after ourselves, and we do sometimes forget it. It was a great reminder and reflection, self-reflection for us all, I'm sure. And I like the daily gratitude journal. Actually, just on that, there were back it was 2016, 17, 18, just had, my husband wasn't very well, and we actually, that was one thing we did, was implemented a gratitude journey over those 2 or 3 years with myself and children and him. And I think that was a really powerful thing that helped us get through that little bump in our life. From Tonya, I appreciate you making self-care a priority for us early as people. Yes. Yeah, not always good at that, but
as I said earlier, I'm not at all accomplished at this. I guess that's why I read and research so much, because we often share and teach what we most need to learn ourselves.
Yeah, very well put.